I caught my spoiled sister making out with my BF a week before her wedding. I couldn't take it and called her fiance. I thought he had ignored it, but he made a huge announcement on the wedding day. The weeks leading up to my sister Sarah's wedding were supposed to be filled with excitement and joy. At least that's what I thought. But as the big day drew closer, a knot of unease began to form in my stomach. And it wasn't just about the wedding jitters or the fear of tripping over my bridesmaid dress. It started subtly enough. Sarah, usually so self-absorbed with her own life, began paying an unusual amount of attention to Tom, my boyfriend of 3 years. At first, I brushed it off as her being friendly, or perhaps a little too enthusiastic about including Tom in the family festivities. But soon, her behavior started to feel off. At family gatherings, she laughed a little too loudly at his jokes, the kind that usually earned a polite chuckle at best from others. She made a point of sitting next to him, playfully bumping his shoulder with hers or finding some excuse to touch him. A pat here, a light touch on the arm there. It was subtle, sure, but something in the way she looked at him when she thought no one was watching made me feel uneasy. One evening at our parents' house for dinner, Sarah was particularly attentive towards Tom. She asked him all sorts of questions about his work, nodding and smiling as if every word he said was fascinating. I tried to convince myself that she was just being friendly, that maybe the stress of the wedding planning was making me read too much into innocent interactions. The days ticked by, each one heavier than the last as Sarah's wedding loomed closer on the horizon. My anxiety didn't let up. It clung to me like a second skin, making everything more stressful than it needed to be. Every laugh, every touch I saw shared between Tom and Sarah was like a splinter under my skin, irritating and impossible to ignore. I decided it was time to have a real talk with Tom. It couldn't wait any longer. It was a cool evening and we were in our living room, the TV casting flickering lights on the walls, some show playing that neither of us were watching. Tom was on the couch looking relaxed, legs stretched out and a beer in hand. I sat on the other end, my nerves bunched tight as I turned to face him. Tom, we need to talk about Sarah, I started, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He looked over, his brow furrowing slightly. Sarah? What about her now? It's the way she's around you. It's been bothering me a lot. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions from spiking. Don't you see how she acts with you? It's not just friendly, it's more than that. Tom set his beer down, giving me his full attention now, but his expression was one of confusion. I really don't know what you mean. Sarah's just being nice. She's about to get married. Maybe she's just happy. I shook my head, frustration building. No, it's not just happiness. She touches you too much, laughs too much at what you say, and it's always looking for ways to be near you. Can't you see that? He sighed, rubbing his forehead. I think you're just stressed about the wedding and seeing things that aren't there. Sarah is your sister. She wouldn't do anything inappropriate. But I see it, Tom. It's clear as day. The edge in my voice surprised even me. Why can't you see it too? There's nothing to see, Tom said firmly. And I think you accusing your sister of something like this is going to cause unnecessary drama. We don't need that right now. I felt a pang of hurt at his dismissal, but pressed on. I need you to at least consider what I'm saying. Watch how she is next time, please. Tom looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll watch. But when I see nothing's wrong, we drop this, okay? Okay, I agreed, though a part of me doubted he would see what I saw. The next opportunity came soon enough at another family dinner hosted by our parents to finalize some wedding details. I watched like a hawk, my stomach in knots. True to form, Sarah laughed a little too loudly at Tom's jokes, her hand finding his arm in a gesture that was becoming painfully familiar. After dinner, while our parents were busy discussing seating arrangements with the caterer, I pulled Tom aside. Did you see that? During dinner? Tom looked genuinely puzzled. See what? Sarah, how she was with you. My voice was low but insistent. Tom ran a hand through his hair, his patience obviously wearing thin. She was just being friendly like she always is. You're reading too much into it. I felt a surge of frustration, almost overwhelming in its intensity. It's not just friendly, Tom. Why can't you see it? He sighed, his expression softening. Look, I know you're upset. Maybe we can talk to her together, clear the air. The suggestion caught me off guard, but it was a plan at least. Okay, yes, let's do that. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Sarah came into the kitchen, where Tom and I were talking, her smile faltering slightly as she sensed the tension. Hey guys, what's up? She asked, looking from me to Tom. I exchanged a glance with Tom, who nodded slightly. Taking that as my cue, I took a deep breath. Sarah, we need to talk about how you've been with Tom. Her eyebrows shot up, surprise evident on her face. What do you mean? I took another deep breath, my hands trembling slightly. The way you act around him, the touching, the laughing, it's making me uncomfortable. Sarah's expression shifted from surprise to confusion and then to anger. Are you serious right now? Tom is practically family. I'm just being friendly. It's more than friendly, Sarah, I insisted, feeling my resolve strengthen despite her denials. It's inappropriate and it needs to stop. Her face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. I can't believe you would think that of me, especially right before my wedding. You're being paranoid. Tom stepped in, his voice calm. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding, but it's making your sister uncomfortable. We just think it's best to talk about it now. Sarah shook her head, disbelief written all over her face. I don't even know what to say. I'm not doing anything wrong. You're both being absurd. With that, she stormed out of the kitchen, leaving Tom and me standing there, the air thick with tension. Tom turned to me, his expression unreadable. I tried, but I really think you're wrong about this. I wanted to argue, to scream that I wasn't wrong, but the look on his face stopped me. Instead, I nodded, feeling more alone than ever. That night, as I lay in bed, the weight of the day pressed down on me. I had stood up for what I believed, yet it felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. My relationship with Tom felt strained, and my relationship with my sister seemed irreparably damaged. As sleep eluded me, I wondered if I had indeed made a terrible mistake, or if the truth was something even more painful than I had imagined. A week before the wedding, the air was thick with tension, and the fallout from our kitchen confrontation hung over us all like a dark cloud. I tried to go about my days as usual, but everything felt off. The easy laughter and lightness that usually filled my relationship with Tom were replaced by strained silences and awkward conversations. I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control, and deep down, I feared what I might discover if I kept pulling at threads that everyone else wanted to leave untouched. The final straw came unexpectedly on a sunny Saturday afternoon. My parents had organized a casual family barbecue at their house, a sort of last celebration before the big day. I arrived with Tom, holding on to a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could get through the day without any incidents. My sister greeted us with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and I tried to return it, but my smile was just as forced. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself watching Sarah and Tom with an intensity that I couldn't seem to shake. They seemed to be deliberately keeping their distance from each other, perhaps out of respect for my feelings, or perhaps because they sensed my watchful eyes on them. Either way, it did little to ease the knot of anxiety in my stomach. Needing a break from the crowd, I excused myself to go inside and use the restroom. The house was cool and quiet, a welcome respite from the sun and the simmering undercurrents of family tension outside. I lingered a few minutes longer than necessary, washing my hands and staring at my reflection in the mirror, trying to talk myself down from the edge of panic that seemed ever present these days. When I stepped back outside, the chatter and laughter of the barbecue reached my ears, a normal family scene, but my eyes were searching for one thing only. I scanned the yard until I found Tom, and my breath caught in my throat. He wasn't alone. Tucked away in a secluded corner of the garden, he and Sarah were deep in conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the way they stood close, their bodies angled toward each other, sent a surge of anger through me. Without thinking, I started walking towards them, my steps quick and silent on the grass. As I drew closer, I could see Sarah's hand on Tom's arm, her head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said. The sight was like a physical blow, and I felt momentarily dizzy with hurt and betrayal. Hey! My voice came out louder and sharper than I intended, and they both jerked apart, turning to face me with wide eyes. Sarah's hand fell from Tom's arm as if burned, and Tom's face was a mask of guilt. What's going on here? I demanded, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. It's not what it looks like, Tom started, but his voice sounded weak even to his own ears. Really? Because it looks like you're having a pretty cozy little chat away from everyone else, I snapped, my eyes fixed on Sarah, who was now looking anywhere but at me. Listen, it's not, Sarah began, but I cut her off. I've seen enough. The words were cold, final. I turned on my heel and walked away, the sound of Sarah calling my name echoing behind me. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every step took me further away from the betrayal, but not from the pain that throbbed in my chest like a second heartbeat. Back at the house, I grabbed my purse and keys, my movements robotic. Tom followed me inside, his pleas for me to listen to him falling on deaf ears. I can't do this right now, Tom. I can't, I said, my voice breaking as I spoke. The sight of him, so familiar yet so foreign in that moment, was too much to bear. Please just give me a chance to explain, he implored, reaching for me. But I stepped back, putting distance between us. There's nothing you can say that would make this okay, I said, the finality in my voice making him flinch. I left then, the door closing behind me with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. The drive home was a blur of tears and red traffic lights, and when I finally got there, the silence of the empty apartment was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the shadows shifted. The pain of what I had seen was a living thing inside me, growing and twisting with each passing hour. It was in those quiet, dark hours that I made my decision. I couldn't go to the wedding. I couldn't stand there and watch my sister marry as if nothing had happened. And I couldn't look at Tom, not without seeing the garden scene replayed over and over in my mind. The next morning, I called Sarah. My voice was calm, detached, as if I was talking about someone else's life. I won't be at the wedding, I said simply. There was a long pause, and then, why? Because of what you think you saw? Yes, because of what I saw, I replied, my voice steady. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice low, but I could hear the edge of desperation in it. Maybe, but it's mine to make, I said, and hung up. The decision brought me no peace, only a deep, aching sadness that settled in my bones. But it was done. I had drawn a line, one that I couldn't step back from. Not now. The only thing left to do was to move forward, even if I had to do it alone. The days following my decision to skip Sarah's wedding were some of the longest and most painful of my life. Each morning I woke up with the hope that the previous days had been just a bad dream, only to be met with the harsh reality that they weren't. My relationship with Tom was in shambles, my family ties were fraying, and my emotional state was a wreck. I stayed in my apartment, my phone constantly buzzing with calls and texts from various family members and friends asking what had happened, why I wasn't going to be at the wedding, and if I was okay. I ignored most of them, not ready to face the questions or the inevitable judgments that would come with my answers. Tom's messages were a mix of apologies, explanations, and pleas for me to talk to him. I read each one, a part of me longing to hear him out, to find some way to fix everything. But the images of him and Sarah together were too fresh, too painful. I couldn't just pretend nothing had happened. After a couple of days of relentless messaging, I replied with a simple text. We need to take a break. I can't deal with this right now. He responded almost immediately. Please, don't do this. We can work through it. But I wasn't sure if that was true. The trust was broken, and I didn't know how, or even if, it could be repaired. I turned off my phone after that, the silence in my apartment a welcome relief from the constant reminders of everything that had gone wrong. The day of the wedding arrived, and with it, a sense of finality. I knew that whatever happened today would likely set the tone for my relationship with my family going forward. The weight of that thought was suffocating. I spent the day alone trying to distract myself with books and TV shows, but nothing could hold my attention. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, replaying the past few weeks over and over. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a deep, gnawing guilt that maybe I had overreacted, that I had ruined my sister's wedding over something that might have been innocent. The next few days were tense. My sister wasn't speaking to me. My parents called, wanting to know why Sarah was so upset. I tried to explain, but I could tell they thought I was overreacting to the wedding, was getting closer, and I didn't know what to do. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid, but now I wasn't sure if Sarah even wanted me there. My boyfriend was still invited, and he said he thought we should both go to show there were no hard feelings. But the thought of watching my sister walk down the aisle, knowing how upset she was with me, made me feel sick. I tried to call Sarah a few times, but she didn't answer. I left voicemails apologizing, saying we needed to talk, but she never called back. I even went to her apartment, but she wouldn't open the door. As the wedding day got closer, I felt more and more anxious. My boyfriend kept telling me to relax, but everything would blow over. But I wasn't so sure. I had a nightmare where I showed up at the wedding, and everyone turned to stare at me, whispering and pointing. I woke up in a cold sweat. Update 1. Things got worse after my confrontation with Sarah. She told our mom about my accusations, and Mom was furious with me. She called me yelling about how I could be so selfish and paranoid right before Sarah's wedding. How could you accuse your own sister of such a thing? She demanded. I tried to explain my side, but she wouldn't listen. She told me I needed to apologize to Sarah immediately and fix this mess. The tension in our family was unbearable. Sarah still wouldn't speak to me. And now my parents were upset too. My boyfriend Tom kept insisting I was overreacting, which only made me feel more lonely and frustrated. A week before the wedding, I went to my parents' house to try and smooth things over. As I approached the front door, I heard muffled voices from the side of the house. Curious. I walked around to the garden and froze in shock at what I saw there, partially hidden behind a large shrub. Were Sarah and Tom. They were locked in a passionate embrace, kissing deeply. Tom's hand was under Sarah's shirt and her legs were wrapped around his waist. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, all the air left to my lungs, and for a moment I couldn't move or speak. Then, as the reality of what I was seeing sank in, a wave of anger and betrayal washed over me. "What the hell is this?" I screamed. They jumped apart, looking guilty and shocked. Sarah's face went pale while Tom started stammering. "It's not what it looks like." But it was exactly what it looked like. All my suspicions, all my fears that everyone had dismissed as paranoia were suddenly confirmed in the worst possible way. "How could you?" I choked out, tears streaming down my face. "My own sister and my boyfriend?" Sarah started crying too. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "We didn't mean for this to happen," but I couldn't bear to hear their excuses. I turned and ran back to my car, ignoring their calls for me to come back. As I drove away, my phone started ringing. First time, then Sarah, then my mom. I ignored them all. When I got home, I packed a bag with some clothes and essentials. I sent a text to Tom. "We're done. Don't try to contact me again." Then I turned off my phone and left. I'm writing this from a hotel room in a nearby city. I don't know what I'm going to do next. The wedding is in a few days, but there's no way I can attend now. My relationship is over, and my relationship with my sister may never recover from this betrayal. I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down. Everyone made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting something. But I was right all along. I don't know how I'll ever trust anyone again after this. So, Reddit. Any advice on how to move forward from here would be appreciated. Update 2. After the shock of catching my sister Sarah with my now ex-boyfriend Tom, I spent a few days in a daze, barely able to process what had happened. My phone was flooded with messages and missed calls from both of them, as well as from my parents. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. Eventually, I realized there was one person who deserved to know the truth, Mark, Sarah's fiancé with a heavy heart. I called him when Mark answered. I could hear the confusion in his voice. "Hey, what's going on? Sarah has been a mess, saying you've disappeared and won't talk to anyone." I took a deep breath and told him everything. I explained my initial suspicions, how everyone had dismissed my concerns, and finally, what I had witnessed in my parents' garden as I spoke. Mark remained silent, only occasionally making a sound to indicate he was still listening. When I finished, there was a long pause. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice low and controlled. "Thank you for telling me. I need some time to think about this." That was all he said before hanging up. I sat there staring at my phone, wondering what he would do with this information. As the wedding day approached, I heard nothing from Mark or my family. Sarah had stopped trying to contact me, and I assumed she had convinced Mark to forgive her. The thought that she might actually get away with this, that she would get her happily ever after, while my life lay in ruins, made me feel sick. I decided not to attend the wedding. I couldn't bear the thought of watching Sarah walk down the aisle, knowing what she had done. Instead, I planned to spend the day alone, trying to figure out how to piece my life back together. However, the evening of the wedding, I received a call from my cousin Emma. Her voice was hushed and excited. "Oh my God. You won't believe what just happened." Confused? I asked her what she meant. Emma launched into her story, so everything seemed normal at first. Sarah looked beautiful in her dress, and Mark was standing at the altar. But when it came time for the vows, Mark stepped forward and said he had an announcement to make. My heart started racing as Emma continued. Mark told everyone that he couldn't go through with the wedding. He said, "I can't marry someone who would betray her own sister and ruin her life by getting involved with her boyfriend." Sarah went completely pale. Then Mark turned to your parents and said, "I'm sorry, but I think you should know the real reason why your daughter hasn't been speaking to any of you." Emma went on to describe the chaos that ensued. Sarah burst into tears. My parents looked shocked and confused, and the guests started whispering among themselves. Mark apparently walked out of the church, leaving Sarah sobbing at the altar. It was like something out of a movie. Emma said, "Everyone's still in shock. Your parents are trying to get the full story from Sarah, but she's a complete mess." I sat there stunned. Part of me felt justified that the truth had finally come out, but another part felt sad for the pain this would cause my family. "Are you okay?" Emma asked when I didn't respond. I don't know," I answered honestly. I never wanted it to end like this. After talking to Emma for a bit longer, I hung up and sat in silence, trying to process everything. The truth was out, but at what cost? My relationship with Tom was over. My bond with Sarah was shattered, and now my entire family was in turmoil. I realized that while the truth had come to light, it didn't magically fix everything. I still had a long road ahead in terms of healing and rebuilding trust. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a small sense of relief. At least now, I could start to move forward without the weight of unspoken truths holding me down. As for what comes next, I'm not sure. I know I'll need to face my family eventually. But for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. If nothing else, this experience has taught me the importance of trusting my instincts and standing up for myself, even when others doubt me. To those who supported me through this ordeal, thank you. Your words of encouragement meant more than you know, and to those in similar situations. Remember, trust your gut, and don't let anyone gaslight you into doubting your own perceptions. Update 3. I thought things couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. The day after the wedding disaster, I woke up to dozens of notifications on my phone. At first, I ignored them, still too exhausted to deal with any more drama. But when I finally checked, my heart sank. Sarah had posted a lengthy emotional rant on Facebook, painting herself as the victim in all of this. She claimed I had always been jealous of her, that I had been trying to sabotage her wedding from the start, and that I was mentally unstable. She didn't mention Tom by name, but she heavily implied that I'd made up the story about them to ruin her life. And to make things worse, she hinted that I'd been the one flirting with her fiancé, Mark, in some twisted attempt to steal him from her. The comments were full of people supporting her, saying things like, "Stay strong, girl," and "Your sister sounds toxic, you're better off without her." Even people I thought were my friends were commenting, agreeing with her narrative. I felt like I was losing my mind. I tried to stay calm, but it wasn't long before my phone started blowing up again. This time it was messages from my parents. They'd seen Sarah's post and were demanding to know why I was dragging the family through the mud. My mom was especially harsh, saying things like, "We raised you better than this, and I can't believe you'd try to destroy your sister's happiness out of spite." I tried to explain again what I'd seen, but they wouldn't listen. They were convinced I was lying, that I was just jealous of Sarah's perfect life, and that I was trying to ruin it out of some deep-seated resentment. My dad even threatened to cut me off financially if I didn't apologize and publicly retract my lies. At this point, I was so overwhelmed that I decided to take a break from social media altogether. I deactivated my Facebook account, blocked my sister's number, and put my phone on silent. I needed to get away from all the toxicity, at least for a little while. But then, just when I thought I could finally catch a break, Tom showed up at my hotel. He must have somehow figured out where I was staying. He looked disheveled, like he hadn't slept in days. He begged me to let him in, saying he needed to explain. Against my better judgment, I opened the door and let him in. The moment he stepped inside, he started crying. He apologized over and over, saying he never meant for any of this to happen, that it was just a stupid mistake. He claimed that he'd only kissed Sarah because she'd been going through a lot, and that he was just trying to comfort her. It was all just a moment of weakness, according to him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He tried to downplay what I'd seen, insisting that it didn't mean anything, and that he still loved me. He even had the audacity to suggest that we could work through this and get back together. I was stunned. After everything that had happened, he still thought we had a chance. I told him in no uncertain terms that we were done. I didn't care how sorry he was or what excuses he had. There was no coming back from this. I could never trust him again. He pleaded with me not to throw away what we had, but I stood my ground. Eventually he left, but not before saying something that sent a chill down my spine. As he was walking out the door, he turned and said, "You know, Sarah's not the only one who thinks you're unstable. Maybe you should get some help before you end up alone." Then he just left, leaving me there, shaking with anger and disbelief. I spent the rest of the day in bed trying to process everything. I felt like my entire life had fallen apart in a matter of days. My relationship was over, my family was against me, and now even my mental health was being called into question. I don't know where to go from here. Part of me wants to just disappear, to start over somewhere far away where no one knows me. But another part of me feels like I need to fight back, to stand up for myself and not let them rewrite the narrative. I've considered going to a lawyer to see if there's anything I can do about the defamation, but I'm not sure if that's the right move. For now, I'm just trying to take it one day at a time. I've reached out to a therapist to help me work through all of this because I know I can't do it alone. And I've started looking for a new job in a different city. I think getting away from everything might be the best thing for me right now. To anyone reading this who's been through something similar, how did you handle it? How did you rebuild your life after everything fell apart? Any advice would be really appreciated.